Hello, and welcome everybody to the Living While Leading podcast. My name is Sharon Ehrlich, and I'm an executive coach for high performing professional women. And I support them to build confidence, take control of their careers, and lead with impact. This show is something that I've created to deal with a crisis that I had when I was very young in my career. And that is that I did not have a lot of exposure to women executives and thought leaders. So I created this show where I invite important people to come and share their wisdom on a very specific topic. And today, I'm really delighted to share with you that I have what I think is a wonderful guest, and I'm going to read you a little bit of her bio. So I have Alex Guadiani with me as a guest today. Welcome, Alex, to Living While Leading. Before we get started, I just want to tell my audience a little bit about you. So Alex is the Vice President of Global Marketing for the Cardiac Surgery Operating Unit at Medtronic, the largest med tech company in the world. She has 15 years of experience in healthcare technology. She's passionate about serving clinicians and patients and deeply dedicated to her people, energized by moving with speed and innovative thinking, and motivated by delivering results. She's been recognized as a people-first leader, focused on effective and efficient teams and championing diversity, inclusion, and equity. Alex received her BA from Harvard and an MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management. She and her wife live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with their 3 children. Alex is a champion of women in business and an LGBTQ plus advocate. I just said a lot about you, but I'm sure I didn't say everything, Alex. Welcome. Please share something else that I missed that I think that our guests might be interested in hearing from you.
Wonderful, Sharon. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and what an honor to be able to join you today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you that are online, wherever you are in the world. I'm excited for this conversation. There's not much more to intro, Sharon, but it might be fun to share with the audience, even though this particular podcast is not about networking. I think that the way you and I met is worth sharing, and it's a fun story where we had our first meeting in Vienna at a conference, and you kindly requested time with me, and we just completely hit it off in the short 30 minutes we had together. And ever since then, we've kept in touch, and you've kindly invited me to this. So just another example of women supporting each other, women lifting each other up, and building our network together as well. So it's wonderful to be here, and thank you again for the invitation.
By the way, where are you tuning in from, Alex?
So I am in Minneapolis right now. However, I basically got, for those of you that are in the US, you know that Hurricane Debbie in Florida is going on, or was. I got out of Florida by the skin of my teeth on Sunday in order to be able to go to Vermont the last 2 days. And then last night had a bit of a planes, trains, and automobiles journey of getting back home, and got home about 3 a.m. last night. So I am gratefully in Minneapolis, back with my family, being able to see my children. But it's been a fun 5 days of travel, I'd say.
Well, I appreciate you being here, given the fact that you got home at 3 o'clock in the morning. Normally, I would be hosting this show from Vienna, but I'm actually visiting my family, and I'm on the Jersey Shore. So I'm in the United States with you, but in a different time zone. So we're going to get started with the conversation now. So Alex, the topic of our discussion today is how high-achieving women can conquer imposter syndrome and make an impact. And I think the topic of imposter syndrome is very interesting because it's usually framed in a way that it's something that's wrong with women. And you and I both understand that that is not really the case. And so I'd just like to pick your brain a little bit and ask you, what do you think are some of the cultural and societal factors that contribute to imposter syndrome, particularly for women in leadership roles?
Yeah, well, for those audience members, as we know, imposter syndrome is basically when we feel like we don't deserve what we do deserve. And that is something that I think plagues women a bit throughout our careers. And you're right, Sharon, that there are some societal and cultural elements, at least in the US, but I'm sure all over the world in various ways, that impacts that. You know, there's this conversation that I've had so many times with mentees and honestly peers and mentors on how to manage it for myself, in women being labeled to, as in TOO, you're to this or you're to that. Don't be to this or don't be to that. So we are very much asked to walk a tightrope that is practically impossible to achieve at every moment. And so I think as a result of us teetering along that tightrope as we go throughout our careers, we start second guessing ourselves. There's likely moments where we'll feel really confident, like we achieved that tightrope walk. And there are moments where we felt like we fell off the rope and missed. But it's just an impossible expectation. I think that that's one thing, a cultural and societal element. Another element is just, you know, I feel like oftentimes we can be raised, not always, but we can be raised to have deference to other people, to give other people credit. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that actually makes women particularly strong leaders, is recognizing the authentic way to understand the achievements of your team and how to discuss it and how to promote that in the right settings, particularly in big corporations that you and I are familiar with, Sharon. That said, there's a balance, I think, of when you put your team in front and when you put yourself in front. And we've just got to figure out our own authentic balance for that. But that societal element of being sort of having deference to others, putting other people in front of us all the time. You know, we do this as parents too, I think, a lot, where you sort of put whether you put your children first, your spouse first, your work first, no matter what you put first, you're last. So at the end of the day, there's sort of this, everyone's more important than you are at every moment. And that's something that we as women, I think as leaders, have to navigate through when we're in the working world, to make sure that we balance that societal and cultural element of who we are, leverage it, optimize it, perhaps understand it and be aware of it so you can use it positively and productively and confidently. And also, though, know when to combat it if it's knocking at your confidence door and having an effect on that.
Well, you know, I'm glad that you said that, Alex, because this is something that I work on with a lot of my clients who, as I mentioned in the opening, are high-performing executive women. Oftentimes, we have to spend time undoing some of the cultural and societal expectations of women, you know, silencing ourselves so that others' voices can be heard. And sometimes, like you said, you can check yourself and you're able to undo this yourself. And other times you need somebody like a coach like me or somebody else, a mentor or whomever, to sort of get you to own your power, right? Because we all have it, right? And sometimes we just have to dig a little bit deeper to recognize that we have it, we own it, and that we just need to sometimes put ourselves before everyone else. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to do. I'd like to talk a little bit about your upbringing and your early career. Can you share a little bit about the experiences that shaped your self-perception as you moved through the world, and particularly as you were elevating into the higher levels of the hierarchy in corporate?
Absolutely. I grew up in California, actually in Palo Alto, but before the internet existed. So it was a little bit different back then, and just a little bit of a different culture. My parents, my mother, incredibly accomplished woman. My father, cardiac surgeon. So it's fun that I found myself in the space that I grew up in now at Medtronic. The two things that they really impressed upon me is just work hard and serve others. You know, that's truly, particularly what they would say at the dinner table when we would get together is, you know, we don't care what, and I have two older sisters, we don't care what you guys do with your lives, but you have to serve other people, give back in some way, and you've got to work for it. And I really appreciated them doing that because growing up with a physician as a father and an accomplished mother in business, I grew up privileged. I did. And yet they still impressed upon me that it takes deep, hard work to get what you want and to understand how to get there. The second thing that I think really played an impactful role in my self-perception is that I played soccer competitively and in college. And that truly gave me three elements that I still bring with me today in my work. One is an appreciation for teamwork. Soccer, you've got 11 people on the field. The goal is to win the game. The goal is not to have the ball to yourself the whole time. So how do you do that? How do you get in the right position? You could touch the ball 3 times in a 90-minute game, but you played all those 90 minutes perfectly because your positioning, your movements allowed other people to be successful in the moment and score the goal. So, but also when you get the ball, do something with it. Do something with it. Take action. Make something happen. Be confident with it. So similarly to what we were just discussing before is know when to put people in front of you, but know when to step in front and have that confident position at the same time. There's an element of accountability to do what you say you're going to do. If you tell your teammate you're going to be in a spot on the field when you say you're going to do it, you better be there and you better do it. So that kind of accountability has pulled me through as well. And then the commitment to win. The goal of games is to win. We got to have fun. We got to play well. We got to enjoy each other, but we got to win. Yeah. And so I think that those 3 elements, in addition to sort of having that humble approach to serving others, all of this hard work, all of this commitment to win, the teamwork, the accountability is in the service of helping someone feel better, having a better life, having a better quality of life. Combining those 2 things has been a really foundational element of who I am and how I've pulled into my career. So that self-perception, to your point, is, you're sort of impressed by your parents to be humble, just to serve others, to work for it, but to serve others and create your whole career around it. And then an element of the sports piece where it builds a bit of confidence in how you shape yourself within a team, how you take credit, how you give credit, and ultimately how you deliver a result.
Yeah. When we talk about leadership, oftentimes we have to discuss what it means to not only put yourself in the forefront, but put other people in the forefront as well. And as women, and I see this oftentimes with my coaching clients, they start to have a concern about being exposed as a fraud. And this is almost the definition of imposter syndrome, right? They are completely accomplished. They have degrees, certifications. They've put their head down, as you said, and they've done the work, right? But on the other hand, they feel like they're somehow going to be exposed as a fraud. And this holds them back from really reaching their greatness. So I'd like to ask you a question. And this is probably going to be a bit personal, but could you share a moment where you felt the weight of imposter syndrome and what that was like for you?
I mean, yesterday, like it happens all the time. it happens all the time. It's not I don't know, for me at least, it's not as binary as I have it or I don't. It's just, when does it poke itself into my brain, throughout every day. And, I guess the things that I've learned over my career, and frankly, the value that you bring, Executive Sharon, is so great, because I think I've had some pretty transformational moments in my development working with a coach. I've worked with 2 coaches, and they've kind of come into my life at a moment when it was really useful. So the impact of a coach is incredibly important and not to be underestimated. One of the things that I have learned over time is the most important person to know is yourself, particularly when in a big corporation like Medtronic. And for those of you that, this applies to being in a smaller organization as well, but being in a big corporate organization, we talk a lot about influence management, navigating our matrix, things like that. And my number one suggestion to people always is, you can network your way around the world, but the most important person to know is you. And the reason is because if you truly take the time, whether it's through working with a coach, whether it's through 360 feedback. I particularly loved the StrengthsFinder 2.0 test. That was a little transformational for me at the beginning of my career, to focus on my strengths versus my weaknesses, which helps with the battling imposter syndrome. I feel at this point, I'm always learning. We're all always learning, but I feel like I have a pretty solid foundational understanding of who I am. And so as a result, those moments like yesterday that the imposter syndrome knocks at your door, you kind of can center yourself a little bit more and block it out or mitigate the risk of it becoming a little bit more big in your brain. So these things happen when huge achievements are achieved, and maybe perhaps you're not quite sure how much to take credit for it yourself versus your team, or getting a little bit nervous about talking about your accomplishments. I just met with XYZ physician. We had a wonderful conversation. I think we got to a point where we want to do a trial with our portfolio, and being able to take credit for doing that is so important. And I think what you mentioned around your clients that I've experienced myself, and yet a kind of second lesson learned that I've had is adding value. I think where imposter syndrome can start a lot for some is when you become a people manager, because all of a sudden your value is no longer your own. Your value is no longer the work that you do. It's the work that you lead. And so I think one can sometimes question ourselves when we become people leaders of what's my value here, right? Like if I'm not doing the work, I'm leading the work, how am I adding value? So the accomplishments of your team, you're suddenly thinking to yourself, should I take credit for this? Or should I give it all to the person that actually did the work? So this idea of transitioning your definition of how you add value, being perhaps vulnerable enough to ask your team, how can I add value to you, as your leader? What will make you feel like you're confident, comfortable, engaged, excited, and motivated to get your work done fast and well? How can I help you do that? So that type of kind of vulnerability, humility, and just engagement with your team can help you define your new value as a leader versus as a doer. So that element, I think, to your point, it really resonates with me with how you've talked with your clients. I went through it myself. But those are two ways that I've found an opportunity to be able to combat it.
And, I'd like to just double click on this a little bit, because when you talked about humility, this is culturally, and I'm speaking in Western cultures, obviously, Western cultures, women are actually not looked on very favorably when they talk about their achievements, right, as opposed to men. And of course, I'm generalizing here, but that is the fact. And so there is a special balance that one has to have with balancing confidence with humility. And that has to be navigated in a very specific way, particularly when you're in a high pressure environment, which I'm sure you work in. Do you have any thoughts on how to maintain this balance?
Yeah, I do. I would propose too that the challenge around finding that balance is not necessarily female specific, but what I think is that the sort of the amplitude of our ability to oscillate and sort of achieve or not achieve that sort of to this or to that, our amplitude is much smaller than a man's, in my opinion. There's a little bit more standard deviation allowance for a man than a woman. So it's not necessarily that the challenge is female only. It's just we've got a smaller window to operate in from my perspective culturally. So a few ways that I've thought about this too is number one, it's got to be authentic. So my personal opinion is no matter if you know someone or not, you could be a complete stranger. We as humans can sense when someone is not being authentic. We just sense it. There's something about us, our sixth sense that we can tell. So that authentic approach to being humble, being confident, sometimes even lack of confidence can be considered inauthentic because one thinks to yourself, well, you're a confident person, but you're not being confident now. Why is that? So I've learned a little bit that if I may redefine it for a moment, and perhaps it will help your listeners think about it differently for themselves, is perhaps it's not necessarily the binary, kind of dichotomy between are you confident or are you humble, or how do you draw that perfect line between the two of them? I might suggest that it's confidence and confidence. As an example, we can and should feel empowered to be confident, to be out front, be a leader, be out front and be representative of your team, make statements, make decisions. and be confident to be in the back, to watch, to be the wind at someone else's back, to promote them around a table that they're not at. Another example might be confidence to trust your gut, because it's built off of years of experience. Don't not trust your gut. And yet there's a little bit of risk for that. So it's confidence to trust your gut and confidence to admit when you made a mistake, which is a critical part of integrity, trust, and just personal growth, in my opinion. So I might suggest people think about it, like look in the mirror, kind of do that self-evaluation, know yourself, find your authenticity and your own approach. And then perhaps apply this framework of not how can I be both humble and confident, but how can you be confident and confident? It's just a matter of confident being out front and then being confident to step away and give someone else the credit. So just a different way to think about it.
Wise words, Alex. I just wanted to encourage our listeners, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will be taking live questions and responding to them. Well, Alex will be responding to them, not me. So if there are any questions there, please don't be shy. I'd like to talk a little bit about mentors and role models, Alex, if you don't mind. What role did any of them help you play in overcoming doubt? You did mention that you had in two particular phases of your life, you had coaches. So I'm assuming that they were professional relationships. But what about mentors and sponsors?
Yeah. Well, I'm proud and privileged to be able to say that being a part of the LGBTQ plus community and being in the role that I'm at Medtronic, I do click the box of a couple firsts for us at Medtronic. However, what I don't click a box of as a first is incredible, powerful female leaders. Medtronic has a lot of them, and what a proud thing to be able to say. I have benefited from the mentorship of both women and men leaders throughout my entire career. And I can confidently share with everyone that I have not had a role at Medtronic without someone helping me get it. Now, of course, the door gets open and you have to walk through it. However, though, I've never gotten a role where it was just a cold interview and, sure, I got the role. No, it was always at the championship of someone else, the referral of someone else. So I feel incredibly lucky for that. I was just talking to a mentor of mine a few days ago, and she shared with me that she's in her early 60s, never had a male manager, So it just goes to show you, and I would say at least half of my managers have been women. So it just goes to show you that generational difference, how she is truly the trailblazer in much of this. And I'm sort of benefiting from a lot of it. But, I pluck things from mentors that I feel like match with my authenticity. And I also just sort of like smile at things that are incredible about them, but just aren't going to apply to me here because of my own authentic style and my personality. Here's a good example. A mentor of mine that I've worked with, that I worked with, but also have known for, 2 decades, is probably the most authentic, warm person I've ever met. When she walks into a room and she's having a conversation with you, you feel like you're the most important person in the room. It's an absolute gift. I don't have that gift. I don't have it, and it's okay. It's okay to not have that gift. I'm a kind person, but I don't know if I would call myself a warm person. It's just not who I am. It's okay. So, but you pluck these things from people that you admire, from people that you love. And then it's okay to also like leave things behind, because if you've once again done that work to know who you are, you can really start quickly applying elements that you find amazing and leaving things behind that just don't fit with your authenticity. Things like another woman like moved really, really fast and took a bunch of risks and made mistakes while she did it. But man, did she deliver results. It was like 3 steps forward, 1 step back. So in the end, you're going to win. That type of approach has really impressed upon me that your team will never will never move faster than you, right? You set the pace. So that's been a true learning of mine throughout my career. Others have taught me how to coach others. I felt incredibly lucky when I first became a people manager, being taught how to do that, having a coach that was disciplined enough to pull me aside in the moment, not waiting 6 months to be like, oh, remember when that happened? Let me coach you there. He would pull me aside into a private room in the moment that he said, no, that's like, I recommend you don't do it that way. Let me teach you. And it was just fantastic. So that idea of address it in the moment, have the confidence to have what people would maybe define it as conflict, but it's really just coaching. You have to develop your people, coach your people. Most people want that directness. They want the immediate feedback. And so that type of stuff has just been absolutely transformational for me in my career. And I feel very fortunate at Medtronic to have had such wonderful leaders and mentors to learn from.
You said something, Alex, that I think is really important. And I have mentioned this in workshops and coaching sessions, and you confirmed it here. Moving forward in your career without having sponsors and mentors is going to be a very long slog, right? It's
Yes.
very difficult to do it. And oftentimes what I understand when I'm working with younger women, so mid-career women, is that they don't understand the importance of having those types of people in their lives. And sometimes we strategize and we put together a plan on, how are you, if your organization does not have a structured mentoring program, which some of them do, and some of them are great, and some of them are very performative and don't really have a lot of impact, who can you identify as someone that you trust and that you admire, who could potentially be a mentor? And so you just have to ask. Sponsorship is different because those relationships develop from trust. People need to understand who you are. They have to know, like, and trust you, and be willing to put a little bit of their skin on the line to talk about you when you're not in the room. But those relationships can also, mentor relationships can be nurtured and developed into sponsoring relationships. I wanted to ask you a question about your younger self. I mean, you have a lot of crystallized intelligence now because you've been in the business a long time. You have a lot of lived experience, a lot of professional experience. What would you say to the younger Alex if you could give yourself advice?
Wow. Let me start with vulnerably sharing with all of you that I have a Post-it note right here next to me. And this Post-it note says, I am loved and I am worthy, even if I fail. And I put it there because through one of my coaching experiences, we uncovered that based on some of my upbringing, based on some of the pressure that I would put on myself, there was a very significant, not fear of failure necessarily, but just felt like I had to put my head down, do the work, and that'll be enough, right? Or is it enough? So I have this here to remind me every single day in my work that, perfection is the enemy of progress, that failure is part of being a leader, and that's okay. And that's where some of my framework around being almost confident and confident is: be confident in your failure, be confident in your vulnerability. I'll share with you guys a funny story. There were many times in my upbringing where I, would, let's say, get like a 98% on a test, and my parents were so supportive and congratulatory, but the very fast second question would be, well, what happened to the other 2%? What are you going to do about it? And so, you sort of accumulate this, like, oh gosh, okay, like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And this is exactly within the realm of this conversation of imposter syndrome. But this reminder of everything's going to be cool. Everything's going to be all right. If you just don't have, like, you're going to be loved, you're worthy, it's good, like, learn from it, move on. And that's the second thing, actually, I would probably tell my younger self is don't dwell on things. Earlier in my career, particularly when I became a first-time people manager, and suddenly like the 90-10 of your role switches, where like 90% of your time when you don't manage people is your own work and your own responsibility. That switches to basically like 90% of, managing people. So I would be driving home. I would dwell on a conversation I had with one of my direct reports for an hour. Did I handle that right? Did I answer that question right? Did I set the tone right? Are they going to quit? just second guessing yourself. So at this point, though, I've really, moved past that. And if I dwell on anything, it's for the purposes of learning, so I can wake up the next day and use it in a confident way to be additive to my out front approach. And then finally, I think I would tell myself, there is an element of knowing when to stand up and knowing when to stand down. I do think that there's a element in our culture. There's an element, whether supported by social media, we could make lots of claims, but there's this element of like everyone's opinion is super important and must be shared at all times at every moment. I think in the corporate world, that's just not the case. We must make decisions together and in alignment. There's times to use your voice and stand up for what you believe in and your values, or if you believe something is, if you really feel strongly about something, but then it's okay to not share your opinion on occasion. It's okay to stand down. And that's some feedback and mentorship I've had with a lot of my younger mentees is they feel that their job is to say their opinion at all times. And I've tried to coach them. It's not that your opinion's not important. It's just everyone else's is too. So let's listen first. There's a time to listen and a time to talk. So that's why I share, time to stand up and stand down. And that type of balance with, particularly when you're working with lots of other functional vice presidents and leaders, I think is a really good thing, because then you get to the best possible decision and solution to problems.
Yeah, we might consider printing that on a T-shirt and some pens, because I think it's very, very sage advice. It's hard to believe, but we've actually come to the end of our conversation, Alex. So I really want to give you a heartfelt thanks for being here, particularly knowing that you got home at 3 o'clock in the morning. This was extremely valuable and a masterclass, I have to say. And this is the whole goal of these lives, is to really provide this was almost a mentoring session that we were able to give to all of our viewers. So I'm really delighted that you were able to spend some time with me and with everyone else. So a couple of closing remarks. Thank you for everybody who's joined in for the live event. And for those who are listening to the replay, I'd like to thank you as well. This episode will become available as an audio on Apple and Spotify and other podcasting apps next Tuesday. So that's on the 13th of August. And on the 25th of September, my guest is going to be Sonia Abulez, who is the Executive Vice President of the parcel business at the Austrian Postal Service. Alex, thank you again. Looking forward to staying in contact with you and meeting you someplace else in the world. Who knows where we'll meet, because this year we had a chance to meet in Toronto, coincidentally. So maybe our paths will cross again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharon. A privilege to be with you.
Goodbye, everybody.